Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
My name is Julia Manning, and I've always played the role of the reliable one, the one who shows up, picks up the pieces, and doesn't complain when nobody says thank you. Maybe it started when I was little, when Rob would get into fights at school and I'd lie to cover for him. Or maybe it started even earlier, when our dad walked out and Mom looked at me at 8 years old and said, "You're the big girl now." I'm 48 years old and I've been the big girl ever since. I work in HR at a mid-sized insurance company, the kind of place with gray carpets and stale coffee where everyone pretends to like each other but secretly updates their resumes during lunch. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. I live in a one-bedroom condo in Des Moines, drive a 10-year-old Toyota, and buy my clothes on sale. I've never been married, never had kids. I used to want all that once. A husband, a dog, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere. But life had other plans, or maybe I made a choice, slowly, over the years, to take care of everyone else first. Until there wasn't time left for myself. 7 years ago, Rob lost his job at the tire warehouse. At the time, he called it a temporary layoff, blamed the union, said he'd be back on his feet in no time. I remember the phone call. He was furious, ranting, pacing, while Lena sat silently in the background. Becca was 11 then, and Max had just turned 8. I asked if they needed help, and Rob said no, but the next morning Lena texted me with the phrase I would come to associate with her forever: "We'll figure it out." That was her way of asking without asking. I started small. $200 that first month, labeled "for groceries," smiley face, on Venmo, with a smiley face I didn't feel. The next month, 500, then 900, then an even 1,000. It became a habit, like brushing my teeth. Every month, like clockwork, I sent it. I never said a word. Not once. I didn't want gratitude, and I sure as hell didn't want pity. It was just something I did because Rob was my brother, and because those kids deserved better. By the second year, I was sending nearly $12,000 a year. That's a used car. That's a kitchen remodel. That's a European vacation every summer. But instead, I made peanut butter sandwiches at work and told my coworkers I just didn't care much for travel. There were times I got tired, times I looked at my checking account and wondered if I'd be doing this forever. When Mom had surgery and I flew out to stay with her, Rob never visited the hospital. He said he had to work even though I knew he didn't. Lena texted me, said the kids had soccer. That was the moment I realized something inside me had started to rot. Resentment. Quiet and slow, like a leak in the roof you don't notice until the ceiling falls in. This past December, Rob invited me to Christmas dinner. He always invites me, but there's a tone to it, like he's checking off a box. "You're welcome, of course," he said. "Just bring your pie like you do." So I baked the pie, apple, with a crumble topping, and I showed up a little early, as usual. I let myself in with the key they never asked me to return. The house smelled like cinnamon and turkey. Becca and Max were upstairs, music thumping behind their doors. Lena was out back, decorating the porch with fake snowflakes that looked ready to fall off the railings. I stood in the kitchen, putting the pie down, when I heard Rob's voice from the hallway. He was on the phone, probably didn't realize I'd arrived. His voice was sharp, like a wire pulled tight. "No, she's coming," he said. "Yeah," I told her. I mean, Jesus, it's not like I could say no. But she's dead weight, you know? Just kinda. Hangs around. Puts a damper on everything. If she shows up, it's gonna ruin Christmas. He laughed. A short, nasty laugh. The kind of laugh that makes your skin feel too tight. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the pie, at the stupid crisscross crust I'd carefully weaved that morning, and felt something break. Not loudly. Not with drama. Just a small, precise snap, like a string pulled too far. He kept talking. Said something about how Lena didn't even want me there. That the kids thought I was weird. That I'd never had a family of my own because I didn't know how to be normal. I walked out the front door without saying a word. Pie still on the counter. No note, no goodbye. Drove home in silence, every mile a peeling away of something I'd held onto for far too long. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was dark and snowing. I sat in the car with the engine running, staring at my porch light, and I thought, I've spent over $80,000 keeping them afloat. 80,000. And they think I'm the one who ruins things? I went inside, made a cup of peppermint tea with shaking hands, and opened my banking app. I scrolled through the scheduled transfers, the auto payments, the savings account labeled for Becca's college. And then, with one finger, I began deleting them. Every last one. I didn't tell them. I didn't explain. I didn't send a passive-aggressive message or write a long-winded email. I just stopped, like a light switch, like oxygen vanishing from a room. And then I waited. Christmas morning came slow and silent, like the first snowfall that doesn't quite stick, just dusts the world in stillness. I woke up to gray light filtering through the blinds and the sound of nothing, no laughter, no clinking plates, no overboiled coffee or muffled yelling over presents. For the first time in years, I didn't have anywhere to be. My living room was quiet. My phone was still. The house didn't smell like cinnamon or burnt ham. It smelled like clean air and lemon cleaner, and maybe something a little sad under that. I padded into the kitchen in my slippers and made oatmeal, the kind you microwave in a mug, with some raisins I found in the back of the pantry. I sat at the small table by the window, looked outside at the empty street, and tried not to imagine what was happening in Rob's house across town. I tried not to picture Lena holding court in the kitchen with her tight smile, Max opening new video games, Becca scrolling through her phone and pretending to be too cool for all of it. I tried not to hear Rob's voice, that laugh, that word deadweight, repeating in my mind like a stuck cassette. It had been exactly 21 days since I'd canceled the transfers. 3 whole weeks. Not a word from them. Not even a fake Merry Christmas text. And honestly, the silence was louder than I expected. I thought someone, Becca maybe, might reach out. She used to text me when she needed help with essays or money for art supplies. She was always polite, always careful. But this year, nothing. It was like I had never existed. I walked outside around noon, bundled in my coat and scarf, and took a slow walk through the neighborhood. There were lights still twinkling on rooftops, kids yelling from the end of driveways, someone grilling something on a front porch like it was summer. I passed a woman dragging a pink scooter down the sidewalk while her daughter ran ahead in light-up shoes. The kind of scene that makes you feel both warm and hollow, depending on the year. And I'll admit it, there was a lump in my throat. Not regret. I don't do regret. But something close to grief. I missed the fantasy more than the people. The version of Christmas I'd built up in my head all those years while paying their heating bill and pretending I wasn't the only adult in the family who could balance a checkbook. I missed believing that my sacrifices meant something, that maybe one day they'd look at me and see more than just a wallet on legs. Last year, I bought Becca's college books, over $600, and I remember her sending a 3-word text, "Thanks, Aunt Jay." That was it. No photo, no update, no nothing. The year before that, I paid for Max's guitar lessons when Rob said the boy needed an outlet. Those lessons cost me a month's worth of groceries. I never saw a single video of him playing. Sometimes I wonder if he ever even went. It adds up, you know. I did the math recently. I'd sent them just under $2,000 a month for almost 5 years. That's like, what, 10 grand total? Maybe a little more if you count the extras. Plane tickets. Holiday meals. That one time I bailed Lena out with her car insurance when she called me crying at 2 in the morning. But who's counting, right? Anyway, I posted a photo that afternoon. Just my dinner table, clean, empty, one plate with mashed potatoes and a piece of rotisserie chicken I bought from the store. A single glass of wine, half full. The caption read, "Peace is better than pity." I didn't tag anyone. I didn't add hashtags. Just sent it out like a message in a bottle. It got 4 likes, none from family. I thought maybe Lena would break the silence first. She usually did when things got tight. But Christmas came and went. So did New Year's. I sat on my couch in pajamas, watching the fireworks through the TV screen, and toasted myself with some cheap champagne I picked up out of habit. Then, 2 days later, it came. A text from Lena. Hey, did your bank mess up the transfer? No hello. No Happy New Year. No punctuation even. Just that line. I stared at it for a while. I could see her sitting at the kitchen table, chewing her nails, hoping I'd say it was some kind of glitch. That I'd fix it. That I'd smooth everything over like I always did. But I didn't reply. I just locked my phone and looked out the window at the snow starting to fall again. Light, slow, soft enough that you wouldn't even notice it building until the world had changed under your feet. I didn't answer Lena's text, not that day, not the next, not even when she sent a question mark followed by the phrase, just checking in. I let it all sit in my inbox like a forgotten debt notice, unopened, unread, unwanted. Silence, I was learning, has weight. It stretches out like a shadow and makes people uncomfortable, especially the ones who are used to filling your time with their needs. I went about my life like I didn't notice the tension curling in the corners of it. Like the money had never been sent and now simply wasn't. 3 days after the text, the phone call came. Rob's name lit up my screen just after noon on a Tuesday. I was at work, eating a leftover sweet potato at my desk and half listening to a conference call about insurance compliance updates. I stared at the phone and felt a knot in my gut, like someone had pulled a wire too tight across my ribs. I didn't answer then, either. Let it go to voicemail. Then again the next morning. And again that night. Finally, I picked up on the 4th try. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to hear what version of himself Rob would show this time. He skipped hello and went straight for the jugular. What the hell is going on, Julia? He barked, his voice already high and tight with that signature mix of panic and self-righteousness. Lena said the transfer never came. The mortgage payment bounced, and we've got Max's school breathing down our necks. You didn't say anything. You didn't give us a heads up. What the hell? I leaned against the kitchen counter and stared out the window while he talked, letting him dig his own hole. I took a sip of coffee and waited until he stopped to breathe. I assumed you had it covered, I said, calm as water. You always said it was temporary. Figured 7 years was long enough. There was a long pause on the other end, just air and disbelief. That's not funny, he said eventually. You can't just pull the rug out like that. What are we supposed to do? I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was so damn predictable. You mean like how you called me deadweight? That kind of rug. That shut him up for a moment, and I imagined him standing in their cluttered living room, phone to ear, mouth open, trying to figure out how the hell I heard that. Trying to spin it into something else. But he couldn't, not this time. You heard that, he said finally, his voice lower now, trying to shift gears. Yeah, I said. I was standing 10 feet away, Rob. You just didn't see me. He tried to walk it back then. Said he was frustrated. Said it was a joke. Said he didn't mean it like that. All the usual deflections. I let him say his piece, all of it soaked in desperation and 2 late apologies. Then I told him I had to go and hung up before he could start crying. That week, I stopped looking at my phone altogether. It was easier than watching the unread messages pile up. I knew exactly what would come next, because Rob is nothing if not a creature of habit. And just like clockwork, the Facebook posts started showing up. Not naming names, of course. Just vague, passive-aggressive little morsels designed to guilt the audience without giving away the plot. Funny how some people disappear the minute you really need them, he posted one night. You give, and then suddenly they're too good for you. People commented with things like, hope everything's okay, and prayers, bro, and I imagined him soaking it up like a dry sponge, telling himself he was the victim. It was almost laughable, except it wasn't funny anymore. It was just sad. A few days later, Max's school emailed me. Not because I was listed as a guardian or anything official, but because I'd paid for his private tutoring directly through my account last semester. The email was polite but firm. Tuition hadn't come through, and Max would be removed from the advanced program if it wasn't resolved soon. I didn't answer. I archived the email. My hands were clean now. And yet, my mind wandered. Back to a winter when we were kids, and I slipped on the ice walking home from school. Broke my arm, cried all the way to the curb. I waited for what felt like hours until a neighbor finally took me to the hospital. Mom was furious, not at Rob, who'd been with me, but at me. Said I was clumsy. Said I needed to stop making everything harder for the rest of them. Rob didn't say a word. That memory sat like a cold stone in my stomach, reminding me of all the years I played the role of helper, fixer, invisible cushion for their chaos. When Mom couldn't pay rent, it was me who quietly sent her money. When Rob wrecked his car, it was me who co-signed the loan. And now here I was, being blamed for finally letting go. I thought the worst had passed until the doorbell rang late Saturday morning. I looked through the peephole and saw him, Rob, standing on my porch in his work boots and a jacket he probably hadn't washed in a year. He didn't look mad this time. He looked tired, pale, angry in a different way. I opened the door halfway. No greeting. No Merry Christmas or even hey. He looked at me and said, "We need to talk." Now. The first thing I noticed was how pale he looked standing on my porch, like a man who hadn't slept right in weeks or maybe longer, with dark circles under his eyes and a scruffy beard that told me Lena had probably stopped bothering to nag him about shaving. His jaw clenched and unclenched like he was trying to decide whether to scream or sob, and he shoved his hands deep into the pockets of that ratty jacket he always wore when he needed people to think he was working hard instead of barely hanging on. I stepped aside without saying a word and let him come in, not because I wanted to, but because I was too curious to see how low he was willing to go. He brushed past me, heading straight into the kitchen like he owned the place, and dropped into one of the chairs like it was court-ordered. His legs started bouncing under the table, the way it always did when he was about to say something ugly and knew it. I didn't sit. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, and waited for the tantrum to begin. "You just stopped," he finally blurted out, his voice louder than the room deserved. "You didn't even say anything. You just cut us off. What kind of person does that to their own family?" I didn't respond right away. I let the words hang there, thick and echoing, like smoke in the air after a fire. He stared at me like he was waiting for me to deny it, maybe even apologize, but I just looked at him, and it was quiet again. "We're family, Julia," he continued, and this time he slammed his fist lightly on the table. "You don't do that to family. You don't just turn your back. We depended on you. The kids, Alina, we had no warning. You just ghosted us like we're nothing." I tilted my head slightly and finally spoke. "Funny," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could. "Because that's exactly how you've treated me for years. Like I'm nothing unless I'm useful." He looked stunned, like the thought had never occurred to him. Like maybe, for the first time, he was realizing this wasn't about a missed payment. It was about 7 years of taking without ever once asking how I was doing. And, because I knew his next move would be to spin this into a guilt fest, I walked over to the cabinet, pulled down the thick gray binder I'd kept hidden behind the cereal boxes, and dropped it on the table in front of him. He blinked at it like it was a bomb about to go off. "What's that?" he asked, though he already knew. I flipped it open to the first tab labeled Year 1 and said, "This is every single transfer I made to your account since you lost that job at the warehouse. Every grocery receipt, every Venmo screenshot, every emailed invoice from Becca's school. I even printed the text you sent when Max needed that new laptop for his classes. Remember that? You said it was for his future." He stared down at the pages, flipping slowly, like each one was punching him in the gut. I let him look. I wanted him to see the weight of it all. The years of silence from them, broken only by requests. The thank yous that never came. The emergencies that always, somehow, landed on my lap. "You said you were too proud to ask," I continued. but you never had a problem accepting. Never once turned it down. Never once offered to pay me back. Never even asked how I was managing. I work 2 jobs, Rob. You think I like skipping vacations and watching everyone else live their lives while I stretch coupons and hope my car doesn't die? He covered his face with one hand and sat there like a kid caught stealing. He didn't speak for a long moment, just breathed hard through his nose like he was trying not to cry. But then he looked up, eyes red, and the mask slipped. "You always thought you were better than me," he said, the words falling out like rocks he'd been carrying for years. "That's what this is about, right? You think you're smarter, tougher, more responsible. You've always looked down on me." I didn't even blink. "No," I said, stepping closer and lowering my voice. "I just stopped pretending you were better than you are." That broke him. His shoulders slumped, and the air seemed to leave his lungs all at once. He wasn't angry anymore, he was empty. And for a moment, I felt something twist inside me, a flicker of sympathy I tried to smother. Because I remembered that boy who used to beg me not to tell Mom when he broke something, the one who held my hand too tight after Dad left. That version of Rob was long gone, but some shadow of him lingered in this grown man now sitting at my kitchen table with his pride in tatters. "I messed up," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I should have handled things better. I didn't think it would stop. I didn't think you'd ever really walk away. I didn't offer him comfort. I didn't reach out to pat his hand or soften the blow. I wasn't interested in soothing the sting that he'd earned. Instead, I closed the binder and picked it up off the table, returning it to its spot above the cereal like a weapon tucked away for later. "You've got Lena," I said, my voice flat. "And you've got 2 kids. Maybe it's time you start figuring out how to carry your own weight." He nodded slowly, wiping his face with the sleeve of his jacket, and for a second I thought he might get up and leave. But instead, he looked up at me one more time, his face clouded with something between shame and panic. "What am I supposed to tell the kids?" he whispered, like he already knew the answer but couldn't bear to say it out loud. I looked at him for a long moment, let the question hang in the air like the smoke of a dying fire, and said nothing. I waited a full week before I saw them again, not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted the silence to speak for me. Let them sit with the absence a while. Let them feel the space I used to fill without anyone noticing. When I finally texted Lena to say I was stopping by, I could tell she wanted to ask why, wanted to pin me down or extract some promise that things were going back to how they used to be. But I didn't offer anything, just said I'd bring gifts and that I wouldn't stay long. I wrapped the presents the night before. Small things, modest things, but thoughtful. A hardcover book Becca had once mentioned offhand, the kind she probably wouldn't buy for herself. A new set of guitar strings for Max, even though I wasn't sure he still played. A scarf for Lena, soft and simple. I didn't bother with bows or fancy paper. Just plain wrapping and tags with their names written in my handwriting, the same way I'd written them every year since they were born. There was something final about it, like writing your name on the last page of a letter you know you'll never send again. The house looked the same as always, plastic wreath on the door, cracked cement step, the faint smell of something overcooked leaking through the walls. Becca opened the door, eyes shadowed by too much eyeliner and not enough sleep, and when she saw me, she didn't smile. Just stepped aside and said, "They're in the living room." Max was slouched on the couch, headphones around his neck, game controller in his lap. He glanced at me but didn't speak. Lena stood up from the recliner and gave me one of those tight, awkward hugs that felt like an obligation. She looked tired, too older somehow, like the last month had stretched her out like dough over a rolling pin. "I brought a few things," I said, setting the bag down on the coffee table. "I won't stay. Just wanted to stop in." Max scoffed, barely loud enough to register, but Becca gave him a look. I could tell she'd stepped into the role of peacekeeper lately, the way kids do when the adults start falling apart. It was always Becca who noticed the cracks before anyone else said them out loud. "I'm leaving town for a while," I said, and I could feel all their eyes shift to me like magnets. "Somewhere warm. Alone." Lena cleared her throat, clearly unsure if this was the part where she was supposed to ask when I'd be back, but I moved on before she could find the words. I wanted to talk to the kids, I said, turning toward Max and Becca. Just for a minute. Lena hesitated but stepped out of the room, and I sat down on the edge of the couch like someone who doesn't quite belong there anymore. I looked at Max first, his jaw tight, his arms crossed. He was waiting to be disappointed, and he didn't want me to know how much he cared. I want you to know something, I began, carefully. For the past 7 years, I've been helping your parents behind the scenes. Money, mostly. Quietly. Every month. Rent, school, food. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want you to feel weird about it. I just wanted to help. Max looked away, jaw twitching. Becca didn't blink. But it's over now, I said. It has to be. I don't hate anyone. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. There was silence. Then Max stood up abruptly, muttering something I didn't catch, and walked out of the room. Not storming, not dramatic. Just done. Becca sat still. Finally, she said. I had a feeling. I smiled, faintly. You're smarter than most people give you credit for. She looked at me and asked, will you come back? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. But I think it's time I live a little for myself. I stood, placed the last gift on the table, and left before Lena came back in. I didn't wait for a goodbye. Didn't expect one. The airport was half empty when I arrived. I liked it that way. There's something peaceful about airports when nobody's rushing, when the noise is just distant announcements and soft footsteps on tile. I walked through the terminal with my carry-on trailing behind me, watching people hug and cry and run, and I felt strangely detached, like I was floating through someone else's movie. As I stood by the gate, boarding pass in hand, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it. Part of me didn't want to know. It was Lena. The message was short. Just one line. Rob told your mom everything. She wants to talk. I stared at the screen, the words flat and weightless, and then locked the phone without replying. The plane began boarding. People shuffled forward in rows. I picked up my bag, adjusted my jacket, and moved toward the line. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I already knew how that conversation would go. The same way all of them did. And I said, mostly to myself, as the engines whirred and the world outside the windows blurred into gray, of course she does. Now that there's nothing left to take.